Hey, I'm Banaka, and today I'm reviewing this Uno 50 Years of Being Wild kind of commemorative deck. Because this is one of the more uncommon instances of a special Uno deck not including a special rule, this video will also serve as my breakdown for the official rules of Uno, in case anybody's wanting to learn how to play. The rules for this and the standard deck are the exact same. So if I'm ever reviewing any other decks and I refer back to the video where I break down the standard rules, this is going to be that video. I'm in a different location right now as I'm now in university, and my sound setup is different and the sound in this room is not perfect. So I hope you excuse me while I just try and record some stuff. Quite frankly, I've had no time to edit or do anything. My Photoshop account is no longer, so it's a whole lot of annoyances. Oh, and we got the rules here, which I'm very familiar with already. Here are your two decks. This is when I guess this is made when they still do these kind of plastic coverings. They've switched to a little paper kind of ring, I guess you could call it, which I quite like. But there's the backs of the cards. Now there is also this premium 50 Years of Uno deck, and get back in there. And if you're wondering what the cards look like in comparison, here are the backs, and here are the fronts. Very different artwork, as you can see. I'm a huge fan of the premium deck. The cards feel great. I really like the backs, but I think this standard deck is very nice as well. So here's your first half of the deck. Very, very standard artwork. I could be wrong here, but I think these kind of borders are a little more kind of blackened, a little more kind of poppy than the standard deck. It's very, very slight, and although I still don't own a standard deck, I can definitely tell that this has a slight variation. Oh, what's that guy? A little grub on the card. Very, very standard stuff. Plus twos, reverses, skips, yada yada yada. Here's your kind of special wild card. It's supposed to be gold. It doesn't have any sort of metallic finish or anything like that. It just kind of looks nice. And some gold wild plus fours. Very, very simple, very slight change. They're all going to have that backing to them. You'll have to excuse me, as I just realized I was recording that all in 25 frames per second as opposed to the 50, 60 that I usually do. It's fixed now, but that intro is just going to have a lower frame rate, unfortunately. It's what it is. Same thing, yellow and red. Does look quite nice. And some more of those golden wild cards. Very simple. Let's get on to the actual rules of this game. So a standard game of Uno, you're going to have your deck. Now, for simplicity's sake, let's assume that I've shuffled all this. I actually can't shuffle, really, but I usually get other people to do it. Each player is going to start out with 7 cards. And I'll just deal them out very, very quickly here. And then the top card from the pile will be used to start. The player from the left of the dealer usually starts the round, and the rest of that deck will act as your draw pile. The aim of the game is to get rid of all 7 of the cards that you start with. Now, of course, you can gain more throughout the match, but as you can see, this is my hand. It's a whole lot of blue and a little bit of wild. The idea is that you place everything on this discard pile one by one to get rid of it all. Now, there are 3 ways that you can get rid of a card in your hand. The first is you match the color to the card on top. And now that's a new card that people play off. Then your turn is over, and the next person would go. The other option is that you match it with a card of the same number. And now that person will have to match it with either a 9 or a yellow. The third option is that you play one of these wild cards. This will allow you to change the color to any color. This will allow you to change the color to any color that you want for the next player. Now, as you saw, the numbers go from 0 all the way up to 9, but there are a few other cards that can really prohibit your opponents. The first is the skip card. You play that, the person after you will lose their turn. In a two-player game, this sort of acts as a go again card. The next action card here is a reverse card. If you're playing counterclockwise, now the play will go clockwise. So it'll just go reverse from whatever order you were going in the moment. In a two-player game, again, this is sort of like a go again card. Another one is the +2 rule. If you play this, the person after you has to draw 2 cards from that pesky discard pile, and it skips their turn. There's the wild card, which, as I mentioned earlier, can change any color. But you can use this if you know your opponent has a certain color, however, maybe they let it slip. You can change that to a different color, and then they'll not be able to play, and I'll get more into that in a second. The final action card here is a wild draw 4. If you play this, not only do you get to change the color, not only does it skip your opponent's next turn, but they also have to draw 4 cards. It's quite painful, but this does have a very particular rule that most people who play Uno don't actually know, and most people just play without it altogether. That's the challenge rule. Now the idea is that if this is in your hand of however many cards, you cannot play this unless it is the only card that you can play. Now you can try and cheat this, and you can play it even if there were other cards that you could play. And if that happens, the opponent that you play it towards has the opportunity to challenge you. Now let's say that you did scheme. You played this and you had that blue reverse that you could have played instead. If that's the case, instead of them picking up 4 cards, you now have to pick up 4 cards, and it doesn't skip their turn. You still get to change the color, but it's still not a great situation. The other option is that, let's say, this was the only card you could play. Your opponent challenges you, and they're wrong, which means they now have to pick up 6 cards. Even worse. Now let's say you've been playing for a while and you only have 2 cards left in your hand. If you play your second last card, when you play that, you have to yell the word Uno. If you play your second last card and you're left with only 1, and somebody realizes that you haven't called Uno, they can call Uno, and you now have to draw 2 cards from that discard pile, bringing you back up to 3. No bueno. Now, let's say you have this handful of greens and you can't play anything. If you cannot play anything, you have to draw 1 card and either play it if you can, or you can decide to keep it as well. But in the official rules, it's only 1 card. And if you feel like your opponent has only 1 card left and you need to play a +2 or something, you can draw from there and hope and get lucky, which I have not. Some common questions is, can you play this as your last card? Yeah, you can. You can also play this as your last card. It's hard to avoid that happening unless you're able to get somebody with a plus any number of cards card. Now there's a number of misconceptions in Uno, which I will now go over now. The biggest one that I've run into is somebody playing a 7, and another 7, and another 7 all at the same time, in an attempt to play multiple cards and change the colors in whatever favor. That's not allowed. Something I see more commonly is that playing 2 numbers of the same color at the same time. Also not allowed. There is a house rule in the video game versions that if somebody plays something and you have the exact same, then you can jump in. And yeah, that does allow for you to play both of them at the same time, but that's only a house rule. Perhaps the most common house rule of all is stacking. If somebody plays a +2, instead of you having to pick up 2 and losing your turn, you can stack it. Put another +2, the next person has to lose their turn and pick up 4. Or maybe they place another +2 and all of a sudden it's +6 for the next person. It can go on and on until somebody can't play that. Now, this also isn't an official rule of Uno. In normal Uno, you can't do this, and you have to pick up no matter what. But this is easily the most popular house rule, and is most definitely played more often than it is not. However, even in the house rule, while yes, you can add a +4 on another +4, yes, that does become +8. However, even in the house rule, you cannot play a +2 or a +4 on a +2 or a +2 on a +4. You can't do that, even in the house rule. Sorry. And yeah, you could say that a house rule is a non-rule, so it really doesn't matter, but that's up to you and how you play. Some other very common house rules is stuff like draw to match, where if you have to draw, you have to draw until you get something that you can play. And that can take a very long time and can be really brutal. However, it's just the way that some people play. I can't even pick up a card. God darn, maybe if I could draw, it'd be a lot easier. Nah. Another house rule is forced play, which if you draw something, whoop, and you can play it, you have to play that. There is no option to keep it for later. Sometimes people play with draw to match and force play, where you draw, finally get one, and you have to play that. It's just something people do. The final house rule, which I think is really ridiculous, is the, I don't even know what to call this. There are two options. One, you play a 7. If you play a 7, you can swap your hand with anybody else at the table. It's really uncommon. I almost never see anybody play with this, and it's quite weird, and it can really change the game and keep it going on longer. The other one, in the same rule, is that if you play a 0, everybody swaps their hands clockwise or counterclockwise. I don't care. Nobody plays with this. Now let's say you guys have draw the discard pile until there's nothing left. In that case, the current discard pile is just whatever you have on the table is reshuffled and played as that draw pile again. Now, there is an alternate way to win this. Some people like to play multiple rounds of Uno and say, oh, let's say I've just won by placing that +2 on what somebody decided was a yellow. There is a scoring system. So let's say somebody had these cards left in their hand. One of my opponents had all these cards. I would receive the points for every card left in my opponent's hand. The points of all the numbered cards are face value. So this would be 8 points, 0 points, unfortunately, 9 points, and then stuff like this. Reverse would be 20 points. Skip would be 20 points. Draw 2 would be 20 points. And then both the wild and the wild draw 4s would both be 50 points. First player to get to 500 across all the rounds wins. And that's basically the rules of Uno. I forgot to mention it earlier, but I noticed this. It's really hard to see on this, and I don't know if I can actually get it, but you can see very, very faint lettering along the 50th Uno cards, the backs of them. I believe if it's anything like the premium box, there's a good chance it says wild in various languages, but if you can tell, feel free to let me know. Thank you all for watching this review of the 50th anniversary standard edition of Uno. I hope that you enjoyed this review. Perhaps the deck itself was interesting, and hopefully you learned the rules of Uno properly. This applies to any basic deck of Uno. Maybe the colors are a little different. Unless there's a specific rule that the deck has, you'll be able to play with these rules on anything, and use any of the house rules. Have fun with it, guys. Thank you all for watching. Subscribing is so dope if that's something you want to do, and leaving a like really does help. I'll see you in the future, and as always, stay tuned.